Csiszar, Zuhao. That's about as much Chinese as I have available right now. This talk, I see there's a few extra people here. This talk is meant to be provocative, but it's also meant to make you think about what the world is going to be like in 25 and 40 years from now. So people that we put into college today are going to see this whole suite, and so we have to educate them so they can handle a very changed world. Because we're in a unique time for humans. I think, if I can make this button work, this is forward. So it can move by itself, but we'll see. So I'm going to talk about what I call a singular wave of change that's happening to the human race now. And I'm going to explain a little bit slowly so I can suck you in, and then we'll get more outrageous. Exponential economy is here. Okay, and it's very important that what goes on is exponential, and exponential happens when you have something that's proportional to itself. If you say, I'm using so many gigawatts of electricity this year, I'm going to use 5% more the next year, and 5% more of that the next year. If it keeps going proportional, it will rise exponentially. So it's a power law faster. And human beings are trained to extrapolate linearly or to just assume things aren't going to change. They always underestimate what's going to happen in an exponential situation. We're in this phase where we have exponential growth, but we have a confluence of multiple technologies coming together now. And each one of those technologies is growing exponentially, and together they will feed even more fiercely. Okay, so this is the 6 Ds of exponential growth. The Ds are the digitization, that as you move from the physical world to the digital world, things get to be a lot easier. You can do things in the digital world very more readily and more cheaply than you can in the real world. Right? So as soon as you digitize things, you can do a lot more, a lot cheaper. Because it's exponential, it looks like it's happening very slowly. It's just slowly increasing and slowly increasing. It's just slowly increasing until it's going so fast you can't keep up with it. So that's one of the phenomena of what's going on in the exponential growth. Once you get out of this, what looks like a linear phase, into the exponential growth phase, you have a disruption. You disrupt existing industries, you disrupt the usual ways of doing things. Things happen very quickly because you're changing in such a rapid way. And so you go on down the list, there's a whole bunch of things that happen, but they're cheaper because they're digital. Replicating them is easier, manipulating them is easier, combining them with the advances in computer power and with the other technologies that are going on makes things happen much more tremendously. So let's move on. I'm just preparing you to realize that we're getting ready to just hit those phases. So here's an example of things that have happened over history and what they did to the economy of the world. And the first one is back at the steam engine, right? That might not seem much, but the introduction of the steam engine and understanding the Carnot cycle and so forth was a major disruption. It made the economy go. It made it possible to be mining more coal. So the steam engine was a great driver in the economy. Now, here it's not shown as the integral bump, what it did to the economy. If you look at the economy as a function of time, you saw some plots this morning where the economy was growing and there's a big step up, and there's another big step up, and another big. That's been going on for a long time, but there's been some major disruption. So the steam engine, later followed by the railroads, about the fact that we started to have railroads. Now, what happened with the steam engine? When you made the railways, it was possible to transport more and bigger goods over greater distances in a better time. And that made a disruption. But if you look at the scale, it was only a few percent per year. It accelerated the economy. Right? Well, these days in China, you're happy if you get 5% a year, and you don't believe it's fully 5%. But so the railroads were a big deal. But now you look back here, when suddenly the telephone, the automobile, electricity were all introduced in a relatively short time. There was a huge increase in the growth, a big step up in the economy, because these new technologies allowed things that we didn't have before. And the automobile doesn't seem like such a big deal, except in China, everybody drives around everywhere. But electricity really is a big deal because it allows us to do a huge number of things. At the beginning, it was just work being done and running your refrigerator, running a few other things. But now electricity does a lot of stuff. Those are a boom. That got up to an 8% per year growth. That's a huge growth in the economy compared to what we're used to. Now, in China, it's funny to say that because you were looking at growth of 8% a year for many years, but we're following the path of the more developed countries, and you do an engineering and so forth direction to go on. So that was, at least it was possible to manage that when you had the advantage of letting engineers do the work, because you could define what the task is very clearly, and the engineers could work it out. But when you don't know what the path is ahead, it gets more difficult. Then you guys can remember, because this is in your lifetime, computers and the internet came along, and that actually made the economy grow quite a lot. And I used to live near Silicon Valley. It was a huge economic boost to the world to be able to have computers that you could use and internet you could use and so forth. And we're all still living on them right now. But we got a lot of stuff coming, and we're just beginning to use them. And so artificial intelligence, which you guys are all here to hear about, but we got energy storage, because we've got to go to clean energy. Energy storage is a main issue. Robotics are a big issue. I hope I have this slides. I have the slides on the robotics. Genome sequencing, that's a big issue. It's going to be a big issue because there's going to be a huge industry in longevity and in making people healthy. And that's going to be driving the things a lot. And the blockchain technology, which is a way that we can exchange stuff. And it's going to become a very important issue for the individual to be able to identify themselves and not depend on some central agency having their identity, right? So right now, you're connected to the world by blockchain. Your identity is from some central location where people maintain it, because it's a big computing. So we're going to have to come up with a system where your phone, your smartphone, or something that you have is enough to identify you as an individual in the world, right? But that's a separate issue. But look at that. It's a prediction here that we're going to see 18% per year change in the economy. That's beyond what you experienced in the best days in China, but this is spectacular growth in a whole different way. It's not like just building the highways and putting in power lines and the internet and all kinds of stuff, which was revolutionary in China, but it already existed in some other parts of the world. This is stuff that's new and is coming along. 3D printing, reusable rockets. Well, reusable rockets don't seem like a big thing, except you see when you see SpaceX launching one of the really giant rockets. It's pretty cool. It's pretty amazing, actually, and you wonder if it's going to keep working. But that is affecting the economy of the world in a number of ways, because it's made it possible for private companies to put up more satellites than all the countries of all the world have so far. Private companies have more stuff in orbit than all the countries in the world. I mean, that's a big change, and it's really going to affect us. And so you can break this up. Well, there's so many new technologies, and they're all coming out together. The economy's got to grow a lot, provided people can handle the growth, right? People have trouble when the economy goes down. People have trouble when the economy goes up too fast, because they can't adapt to those big changes so much. Here's some real world examples. I'm just setting you up for what I'm going to hit you with in a minute. And that real world examples of exponential growth, artificial intelligence. You guys are all aware of that, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But the fact is artificial intelligence has been talked about for a long time. I remember going for Stanford to the AI research lab, and they were saying, well, we're working on it, but it's a really hard problem. And it is a really hard problem, but we have partial solutions, but there's a lot more to come. There is the biotechnology. This is the one that one of our leaders is so interested about. The fact is, we're beginning to understand how cells work, how DNA works, how we can do things to rejuvenate basically stem cells or some earlier kind of cells. We can really cure diseases in a way that we never could before. And we're just at the threshold of that. But that's going to be a really big business. I mean, because people are biological and you've got to fix the biology. And the renewable energy. The renewable energy that I mentioned this morning, remember, energy is 10% of the GDP of the world. The renewable energy is really a big deal to convert, which is now 90% not renewable energy, into a big fraction being renewable, a very big fraction being renewable. That's going to be a huge business. It's going to be 5% of the world GDP every year for at least 20 or 25 years. It's going to be a big thing. And we're at the early stages. The technology there is just in its early phases of development. So the impact of exponential growth is huge. It really creates a lot of changes. And is there anybody in this room that doesn't have a smartphone? I see no hands up. When was the first smartphone made? 15 years ago. You can't remember when you didn't have a smartphone. But the fact is, that was a revolutionary change, and it kind of changed our life. It's kind of a little assistant. We don't go on trips without checking the GPS. We do a bunch of things like that. So it's an adaptive technology, and it's an example of exponential growth, where we expect people to have smartphones. We expect people to be able to charge their phones in places they go to, but also to make charges and buy things and so forth. So exponential growth makes it so it gets adopted quickly because it makes your life better or richer or some way improves things, but it's a big change to have the smartphone, to have these other assets. It changes the way society is. I mean, I used to, when I walked down the street and I heard somebody talking, I would think they were a crazy person. And now they're on their phone because they're just walking around talking to people far away. There are opportunities and challenges, but when there are opportunities and challenges, it's very challenging. You've got to be, able to balance yourself. It's like the old timers that used to cut trees and walk on the logs going down the river. They have to be able to balance and be able to walk on a shifting kind of environment. I want to talk about evolution and the singularity. And evolution is going along on this curve, and intelligence is growing up exponentially. This guy here at the end, it's hard to tell if it's a human, or a human augmented, or it's an AI, right? What's it going to come to? We're going to change the world. What are humans going to turn into? I mean, the apes turned into hunter-gatherers and then agriculture, and then people who were making robots. What are the people who are making robots, or the robots going to turn into? That's the question. Obviously, I'm predicting that people are going to keep getting smarter in one way or another. We should be thinking about general AI. And what do we mean by general AI? We mean general artificial intelligence. That is, what we have now are the large language models, which basically are something with 1% of the neural net of a human being, yet on specific tasks and things like that are picked out, they do better than about 80 to 85% of human beings. So if we continue to have improvements in computational power so that we can go from 1% of the neural net to where we can do 100% of the neural net, how smart are those guys going to be, and when is that going to happen? What about when we get to have 10 times the neural net of humans, or 100, or we combine neural nets with other sources of knowledges and ability to do mathematics and other kind of logical reasoning? How smart will those things be? This is not the picture than I really have. This is the kind of issue that humans have, because first of all, they make robots anthropomorphic, and they think about them doing math like high school math. Whereas we already know for 50 years we've been able to do calculus in computers, right? You've been able to do Mathematica and other kinds of language like that. Putting that into an AI model isn't so impossible if you're going to think about what's going to happen in the next step. Let's talk about what John von Neumann named the singularity. So John von Neumann is one of the people that impresses me as one of the smartest humans that ever lived. So I compare him to the AIs that I'm expecting to show up here in 10 years and so forth. And he termed the phrase singularity, and he was a mathematician, besides being smart and also doing some economics. He was a mathematician, and the word singularity means something very specific to mathematicians, more specific than us thinking it's some singular thing. It means it's a thing that happens that allows you not to predict the future. And the reason is, when AI gets to a certain level, and these other exponential things will happen so fast that human beings can't keep up. If a company comes into being and makes huge amounts of money and then goes out of business in less than a second, right? Less than the time it takes me to ask a question, how can a human keep up? Well, you should have invested in that company and taken the money, right? And then you got to hire assistants to do it for you. But there comes a point where when technological changes are happening more rapidly than a human being can deal with it, that you have what he called an essential singularity. Now, in mathematics and in physics, we have some singularities that we call singularities, but we know how to subtract them out and still get subtract infinity from infinity, but still get an answer that we know and trust. And quantum electrodynamics is an example of that, where you have the, a 1 over r or 1 over r squared, depending on you're talking about force or energy, and you're going to take the electron to 0, to r equals 0, and you get infinity. But you know how to subtract away that infinity, and you still get answers that are good to 8 decimal points or more. We don't know because we haven't tested it more severely than that. So those singularities are not essential singularities in the kind of thing. This is an essential singularity. You can't subtract it away and predict how the human race is going to go after that. It's a more complicated question, and that's what John von Neumann pointed out. He also, when he was thinking about this, he asked a number of important problems, but he had another problem that I have the same question. In 1948, he posed this question, or this thing. You insist there is something a machine can't do. And he said, if you tell me precisely what it is a machine cannot do, then I can always make a machine which will do just that. That was his response to the argument, is a machine can never think, or a machine can never do X. Right? Those are interpretation things. When the machine takes your job and does it better than you did for every single human being, it doesn't matter whether they're thinking or not, they're doing it, right? But they're thinking in a different way. And so he did a lot of tremendous mathematics, a lot of other things, but this is one of the things that he pointed the way to that now has AI people more afraid. What they're afraid of is the intelligence explosion, right? We're having all this exponential growth powered by human intelligence. We're using the methods of science, the methodologies of science, the methodology of engineering, and we're having a confluence of these things that is made by human intelligence, basically, at such a rate that we're already having trouble. I mean, I claim we're already starting to be at the singularity, but we sweep some of that stuff under the rug, but we've noticed that mostly people that get older don't handle the changes, right? They just kind of say, oh, somebody help me with my phone. But the thing is, that's powered by human intelligence. Suppose you get something that augments human intelligence, can you make progress faster? And the answer is yes. How are you going to get extra intelligence? You're going to get extra intelligence by taking a human being and augmenting them, or by inventing general AI and then augmenting it. And once it learns how to reinvent itself and redesign itself, you can make more and more intelligent systems. And that's the part, that's the place we're approaching now. So once you have the singularity, it's probably only a matter of time or accident or whatever before we get superintelligence and things run way faster. So that not only do we have the singularity where we can't keep up, but it actually goes faster. It goes faster than faster, right? It goes a double exponential up. That makes it a little more difficult to imagine what humans are going to be doing, right, at that time. So I'll have some little plots underneath of people's prediction about when computers are going to get the capability of a human brain or of all human brains. And the curve in the middle is for 1,000 pounds, British pounds, how much, when can you do that? And the answer is by 2050, you can, for 1,000 pounds, buy a computer that's smarter than all humans in terms of intelligence. Well, people argue back and forth, but in fact, that is probably the upper limit of when that's going to happen. So if you are somebody who's 20 years old in college now, you will be 45 when that happens. Right? It's not that far away, but it probably happens sooner. The AIs are accelerating faster than people anticipated. So here's the problem with humans where they extrapolate kind of linearly, but things happen exponentially. So here's the curve versus year of when AI, how good AI is going to be versus time. And you can see when ChatGPT-4 was done and people were saying general artificial intelligence was 18 years away, and this year when they're saying it's 8 years away, and if you extrapolate that curve as a simple parallel, it's 2 years away. But if you think that those guys are actually, the new people are smarter than the old people, then it's 8 years away, which is 2030. So by 2030, we expect AI to be smarter than people, basically, smarter than a person, right? Anyway. And it's then a question of how quickly we implement these things into society, because what I see from my experience, humans are kind of slowing down the rate of progress that would normally be adapted. But we'll see what happens. Bear in mind, people have been consistently underestimating the time, and this doesn't even count on the fact that computers should get to be much more powerful than they are now, making the job a little easier, and software should get more powerful. So if you look at the real advances in computers, you realize there's the Moore's Law, and the hardware is improving doubling about 18 months. But if you look at the software has been doing pretty well too. That is, in terms of computing power, almost half of the improvement in computing power comes from improved algorithms and software. Now, that's going to get trickier unless the AI is really smart at writing software. Guess what? There is a lot of AI writing software now. ChatGPT is doing a lot of software writing, so maybe it'll be smart enough to do a good job. It's looking at the epochs. If you think about what might be happening in the entire world, right? That when you first had to get the universe cooled down to the point of there being physics and chemistry, then you had these quantum states and everything. Then you could finally make, biological systems with DNA. Once you have DNA, you have a lot of complications that are allowed. And you keep going on until you get technology. There was no guarantee that biological systems would get to the point where they would develop technology at a high rate. There are plenty of animals that use a little bit of technology, tricks, twigs to get bugs and so forth. But we've now made it a passion of human beings to develop technology and start up new companies and get everything going. And so we started this exponential period in terms of what's going on, but we should be having some merger of technology and human intelligence or artificial intelligence. And the question is, what happens after that? Does the whole universe wake up? Well, that's kind of religious speculation. And so here's the point that I was trying to make. people tend to extrapolate just the world's going to be like it is now, but a little change, just a little linear change. That tends to be a bad prediction of the future. Some people then predict, well, it's going to get faster, so they predict a little further up. But exponential goes much faster. That's the thing that we have trouble. Now, the issue is, what stands in the way of exponential growth in a bunch of these technologies? And the answer is humans and human regulations and so forth. But in areas where there has been these particular breakout situations. Here's examples of things that are going on. So this is the scorecard versus, of how well things are going versus the impact on humans. And the surprise is wearables, that is wearables that track your heartbeat and how much you walk around. I can look at my phone and see how many steps I did every day. It looks at all of the wearable. That has made a tremendous impact. A huge fraction of people, something on the scale of a quarter, a fifth or a quarter of all people, are using wearables to track their health. And that's a big impact. Down here, you'll see the AI and the robotics and so forth appearing. It's beginning to be adapted, but the impact on humans hasn't been so large yet, we can see. And here again is another person's prediction, Ray Kurzweil, who's been a fan of this, the curve of when this is going to happen. And again, he said 2050 is when there's going to be some AI that's as smart as all humans. Not just one human, but all humans. But you can get that for $1,000. You can, it's the same price as your smartphone. You can get a computer that's smarter than all humans. So this is just a big picture kind of a thing. The stuff I worked on, the universe and how it began and all that kind of stuff, well, that's actually a simple thing, but it's also very high energies and a lot of stuff going on. You can't have very many complicated things. You can only have a limited number. But as the universe has cooled down and things have gotten more stable, you've been able to do, and you've been able to manufacture things that are smaller and smaller, until finally we're doing stuff on the micro scale, and eventually stuff that's going to be on an electro scale. That's enabled a huge number of more things. And if you look on the same sort of time scale going the other way, that's allowed the formation of life, and then of humans, and then of human institutions like big cities and nations. And that's just sort of a big history perspective of how things are developing. But we could hope we could think about, what does that mean about what's going to be happening in the future? I don't know, it'll be interesting. You don't usually think about it. But there is going to be some kind of continued growing environment as long as we can keep digitizing things, because doing more calculations and doing more work, that is cheap in almost everything except energy. We have to learn to make more energy efficient computing systems. Okay, so that leads me to the question that I've been thinking about for some time. What should the new university look like? Okay, so Professor Pirvinitri and I taught a 10-week course online. It was hosted by Fun and Future Learn, and it was a course named Gravity, and we picked it because we knew that gravity waves were about to be discovered. We knew several things were going to happen. We knew it was going to be something that would interest people. We had tried to use the teaching theory, not the theory, the teaching experience, which is how do you teach people the best? It's not standing here in front of them talking and lecturing. It is letting them get their hands on stuff and do stuff with it. And so we tried to do a lot of the things that are going on. One of the things is called reverse classroom, where you record the short lectures and you then have demos and quizzes and problem sets and so forth. They do a long way in TAs and interactive things, so that they're busy doing things. And we ended up having 90,000 students complete our course all the way to their little degree for that. Okay, that is 1/2 of my student hours for 40 years of teaching. That one course, and basically most of it was in one of the 3 semesters. The first one we were getting known. Second, we had this huge enrollment. The third one was cleaning up for people who couldn't get in the previous one. And we were the second most popular course that time. Guess what the first most popular course was? It was how to become a refugee or an immigrant to England. because there were problems happening in the Middle East, just like there were problems happening in the Middle East over again. And there was a tremendous set of people who wanted to go from the Middle East to go living in England because they thought it would be a much better life. And they had some people they knew about that were already there. Now, this one course has been passed as a science course by one of my colleagues from HKUST in Hong Kong. He taught a course on the chemistry of cooking, and he taught it many times. And so his total number of students have been through there now exceeds this. But think about how many people we reached. I gave a talk here a little over a year ago on how AI can be used to discover drugs and set up clinical trials, and there's a whole set of things. There's like 8 or 9 steps to do that, and how something that now costs between $1 and $2 billion typically, and takes on the scale of 7 to 12 years, is routinely now done in roughly 2 years at much cheaper price. There are companies that now run this kind of AI system, basically automated systems run through the AlphaFold, which is the protein folding, and look through for various things that they could find disease solutions to with simple drugs, and then choose the ones that are most promising, and then put those in trial. And once they get to the end, towards the end of the trial, you sell them to a big pharmaceutical company. You sell the light devices to do. And they're doing that. 2 have already been through and are actually in human use, and there's another 4 in the system, and there are a couple other companies doing that. So it's an example of what can go on. There were a few hundred people in the audience. 270,000 people listened to my talk online. That's different, right? I mean, it was a serious scientific educational talk. That's different from what you would do in a class in a college, right? Why does a researcher give lectures to graduate students where you have 10 or 12 people when you can give lectures that are online and streamed and so forth? So what are you going to do about what's going on? And another example I point out, Duolingo is teaching more people more languages than all the colleges in the world. One company, right, is actually teaching more students how to speak languages, foreign languages than them. So what does that mean? What should a university really be doing? That's the question. And so I worry about it from this point of view, but I worry about it from the second point of view. And that's because I have some members of my family are now getting up to where they're going to college, and I'm saying, wait a minute, is it cost effective? Is it right? Are you training for a job that's still going to be there in 10 years and so on? But if you look at this, the things like Duolingo, the ed tech, the technology companies that teach educational, they are a big business. Just like colleges and universities are a big business, these guys are a big business. And you look at the global, educational software market, it is growing exponentially. It's going to grow even more. And so if I were a university, I would be worried, how am I going to compete with these online systems? But that's not the only thing that I would be worried about. And because COVID lockdowns made it so it was clear to people that you needed to have much more stuff online. I mean, our university did a lot of courses online, but many other universities were put under big pressure to do it. I started thinking about what is the university's mission if you think about how much the world is going to change between now and 25 years from now. I was thinking, well, the university should be teaching people how the technologies change, because they're not going to learn that from their parents. They're going to have to learn, except unless they have very educated parents, they're going to have to learn that at college, and they're going to take that information when they go out to jobs and stuff like that. But they need to learn something else. And then I started going back and looking at this, because there have been crises before about what education should be, right? There was a time, particularly in Europe, when some members of the church didn't want people to get an education or wanted to control what is. And so universities in the Middle Ages in Europe had 2 models. There was basically the French model, which was controlled by the church. Instead of allowing teachers to go out and teach whatever courses they want and collect money from students, they would organize them into colleges, and they organized them into colleges, and that way the church could supervise to make sure they were teaching reasonable kinds of things and put pressure on them. But it also made some equilibrium in the salaries of the professors, so that some professors liked it, right? Now, some professors now object that all professors pay about the same, but it's not quite. The other image was the Bologna Northern Italian model, which was the students ran the university, and they hired and fired the professors, and they did. Those are the two different kinds of standards, but they sort of converged to the same kind of thing. They wanted to give people what's called a liberal education, which is an idea that developed during the Middle Ages, moving up to the Renaissance, that when people had these broad, great ideas of how humanity should advance and how people should behave and be ethical and so forth. And so the liberal education didn't mean we taught them liberal arts or this or that. It meant we taught them how to be a free man and a citizen, because still at that time there were some people that were slaves or serfs or whatever it is. But people who were going to be running society and understand society, teach them what they need to know to have the historical perspective and to have the ethical and other viewpoint for running the society in a reasonable way. That is an idea that we need to revisit, which is going to be when human beings become superfluous. How do we handle first the transition, but second of all, how do we treat human beings when they're pets, basically, when they're the auxiliary citizens, because they can't keep up with the outside physical world and the sense of changing the environment and so forth, but they're still living and doing things. And so that's the issue, is what should a university be training and teaching its students? And the answer is that's doubly difficult during the transition period, because you need people with the sharpest people with the best technical capabilities and the best ability to keep up to handle the transition, but you need to have a set of people who are coming into this new environment of what it means to be a human. What is the purpose of having, in a certain sense, I use the word liberal education in the sense that it's not just the liberal arts, it's the education of how you handle the rapidly changing world and the new environment that humans are going to live in. You want the humans to be free people in the sense that they have a sense of duty to be able to operate in the world, but also to contribute in an ethical and straightforward way to what's going on. That's a difficult thing. And so we need to have a set of people who have tremendously good skills that can work with the AI in the transition to where AI is doing everything. That's 25 to 30 years or something like that. And then we need the other people to know how to behave and not listen to the internet too much and hear too many things that contaminate their way of thinking. It causes them to be, bad citizens or bad, people in terms of their operation. The ability to have intellectual exploration and to be able to understand the historical sweep of what's going on, even though you don't see all the details of what's going on in the world, that's the critical thing that I think universities have to be doing. This is to provoke you guys, because especially from a professor, you go, oh my God, this is a big change. But yeah, it is going to be a big change. So here's the liberal education. We want to have well-rounded individuals that operate thoughtfully in society. That's the basic goal that I think the university has to, or college has to be driving towards. Mostly that's an undergraduate education, but the fact is, if you don't need most people to work, they can spend more time going to school or taking longer time. I mean, you don't have to kick them out of college, because that's, it's a thing that you can try and do. And part of the question you're going to have is, should they be taught by humans or should they be taught by AI? And that is a hard question. I think most of the time, for technical subjects, the AI is going to be a better teacher than a human. It's when it comes to human judgment and social interactions, so humans may be still better for a while longer, but not forever. But because you have to realize, if the AI gets the entire data set of the world to process, it should be a better human than a human, because you can train on all the humans. Why do you think actors and singers and famous people don't want to be replicated in AI, because eventually AI will be better than they were, right? It's a real question that people in colleges and universities should be thinking about. In 30 years, what should a degree from Beijing University have taught you? Right? This is from the 12th century. My formatting didn't transfer here too well. Called The Philosophy and Arts. Right? And this was their idea of the 7 liberal arts and the thing. So they had this beautiful drawing on the church wall and so forth. And the various people who were, that's what they expect people who were going to getting an advanced education, what fields they should be able to learn back in the 12th century, right? We have a different sort of, 12th century things were changing more radically. Now things are changing much more radically, but we still need to do it. I had one more picture, which was kind of like this, and I thought was quite amazing. This is a picture that looks like it belongs in a church, but it was in a sort of a university. This shows the angels and the whatever it is, but down below are the professors teaching the various courses and so forth. This picture set is all women down at the bottom, but it's the set of things that people were expecting to try and teach and learn at the university. And so people had this crisis before, but it's a different kind of crisis. This one's an essential singularity. That one was a religious and other kind of singularity. Here are my conclusions, so you guys can get ready to ask me hard questions, or we can get into a discussion. How do we know? And how do we know comes to the cartoon at the bottom. But basically, we have to focus on developing a cultural viewpoint and acknowledge, the science to handle the changes that are happening in the rapid world, and we have to be able to trust them that they're going to do the right thing. That means we have to teach the scientist not only how to be great, but how to communicate to the people we're trying to do this in the best way. That is not happening now. People are mistrusting the scientists, and how much of you guys would you give your money out of your bank to Elon Musk to run his show, right? Well, he's making a bunch of these decisions for you. With all this great deal of uncertainty and changes, what does it mean to be a human? What is it we want humans to be doing? What is their role? We used to be defined by our job. AI is going to do our jobs. What is it that makes us a human? What are we going to do as a human, right? After that, we somehow are going to have to hand off to the AI the science, and then they're going to make the progress and send the science back down to us. Right? So we'll see, who do we know, who do we trust? So as Bob says, oh, Alice, you're the one for me. And Alice says, but Bob, in a quantum world, how can we be sure? Right? I mean, it's true, right? We have a quantum world. It's a singularity. It's the same thing. It's telling us you can't make the predictions because you can't subtract that singularity away and see what should really happen. So the question is, what should we be doing as humans to prepare for the singularity? Because the singularity, I think if you look around, you'll see there's already hints of it. You're already noticing it some. It's just human beings are dragging their feet as much as they can, slowing things down. But it's coming along anyway. And the reason is we have too many countries and too many sets of rules, and people who are going to start these startup companies, they're going to start them up in a place that lets them start them up, and then they're going to take over when they can. Okay, so thank you. Let's have a discussion.